Welcome to the Midtown Scholar Bookstore. My name is Alex. I'm the program director here at the Scholar. Thank you for joining us in Harrisburg on this rainy evening. We're happy you're here, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's program with Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah and Airea D. Matthews. Before we begin, some quick housekeeping notes as always. One, we are early in our event series for 2024, and we've announced many more authors scheduled into the new year. One that I'd like to flag is this Saturday, we'll be hosting award-winning poet Kaveh Akbar for his debut novel, Martyr. The book has received rave reviews, and we hope you'll be able to join us this Saturday. Additionally, take an events flyer as you leave, and stay tuned to our social media pages, website, and e-newsletter for event updates. Lastly, we have copies of Nana's books available for purchase tonight at the cafe, both Chain Gang All-Stars and Friday Black. And Nana is sticking around for a book signing after the event. A quick reminder that book sales are the bedrock of sustainability for our author event series, and each purchase helps to support the bookstore, authors, and the future of our programming. At this time, it's my honor to introduce our speakers this evening. Our interviewer is Airea D. Matthews. Airea was Philadelphia's 2023 Poet Laureate. Her first collection of poems is the critically acclaimed Simulacra, which won the 2016 Yale Series of Younger Poets Award. A Pew Fellow, she's an associate professor and co-director of the creative writing program at Bryn Mawr College. A huge thank you to Airea for joining us this evening from Philly. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that she also recently is the author of Bread and Circus, a memoir in verse that is a bold poetic reckoning with the realities of class and race and their intergenerational effects. And yes, we do have signed copies up at the cafe. Our featured author this evening is Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah. Nana is the New York Times-bestselling author of Friday Black. His work has appeared in the New York Times Book Review, Esquire, the Paris Review, and elsewhere. He was a National Book Foundation's 5 Under 35 honoree, the winner of the Stein Book Award and the Saroyan Prize, and a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle's John Leonard Award for Best First Book, along with many other honors. Raised in Spring Valley, New York, he now lives in the Bronx. Of course, Nana Kwame's new novel is titled Chain Gang All-Stars. That's why we're here. It was a National Book Award finalist, a New York Times Best Book of the Year, a Read with Jenna book club pick, a New York Times bestseller, and many, many more awards and accolades. I've got to read just one blurb. This one's from the Washington Post. Quote, like Orwell's 1984 and Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, Adjei-Brenyah's book presents a dystopian vision so illuminating that it should permanently shift our understanding of who we are and what we're capable of doing, end quote. We're so honored to host Nana Kwame and Airea Matthews in Harrisburg. So without further ado, please join me in giving them a warm Harrisburg welcome.
Hello, Harrisburg.
Harrisburg. How you guys doing today?
Good people. Have you read the good news? Tonight, we are so happy to have Nana here to talk this brilliant book and to think through together some of the questions that I had as a reader. Because when I ask questions, I usually ask as a reader because I was so enthralled with the beautiful work that you did. But before we start, I was wondering if you might read some.
I can.
Yes!
First off, thank you so much for doing this with me. I was telling someone earlier that when I think about getting compliments about the book, it means like times 10 when it comes from a poet. So I'm very grateful. Real quick before I get into the section I'm going to try to read. This is my second book. My first book came out a couple years ago. It was called Friday Black. I was like 26-ish, 27 when it came out. That was like a big part of the coverage. They're like, he's 26. Oh my God, he's 26. Wonderkund kind of thing. And I remember thinking, I kind of wish they talked about my age a little bit less. Now I'm 32, about to be 33, and they don't talk about my age at all. And I'm like, well.
They love youth, but I still see you as very young and very youthful.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I appreciate My back doesn't feel that way, but I feel like
I get it.
now they're like, regular age Negro has a book. Again. For the first time around with the hardcover, I was reading from the beginning of the book. I say the beginning and not the prologue because I once canvassed Twitter and said, when you guys see prologue in a book, you definitely read it, right? The results were varied at best. I'm not trying to shame anyone, but please read the prologue. It's part of the book. It's not a preface or an introduction. I guess there's just too many terms.
There are a lot of terms.
But
There are a lot
prologue
of terms.
means you should do that. You should read it. But now I've been trying something new. So this is me kind of stalling as I'm like psyching myself up to try something that I haven't done except for once before, which is read from a different section, which requires a lot of artist participation. So you're gonna have to kind of do something like a little bit on rhythm. So white people, this is your chance to beat the no rhythm allegations. This is your opportunity. I literally heard someone say, "Oh no." It's okay. Well, we're gonna practice first, and it will come up later on. I'll tell you when. So, okay, you guys are fun. All you're gonna have to do is this. Just like that. Keep going. Yep. Perfect. I watched both Tar and Maestro this year.
So you got it.
So I feel like I can do that.
I'm a composer.
All right, now shifting into semi-serious. I'm going to read from the middle of the book. It's a part from the perspective of a character named Hendrik Scorpion Singer Young. He's called Scorpion Singer because he has this habit of singing, and even his like sort of inner monologue has this sort of sing-song quality, his poetic quality that has to do with the fact that he was in a type of prison that enforced 24-hour silence, which is actually a system that actually existed in New York in the Auburn system. And so as a result of that, it's almost as like his mind has like sort of stretched out against that and become very interested in singing. But the moment that we're finding him, he's with the chain. And again, maybe if I should just set it up a little bit more, the book is about an imagined future in which convicted wards of state can opt out of a sentence of at least 25 years and participate in death matches. And they sort of travel the country on these like chains, these chain gangs. But it's futuristic, so they can like move around to some degree, and there's form relationships and all these things, and they're always observed. And the chain that Hendrik Singer Young is on, they recently just suffered a loss, and so this chapter is about that, them sort of thinking about that. And then there's also that chain also happens to have three. It used to have three like neo-Nazis as well. The chapter's called Sung. We take steps heavy with loss, both sides of the chain depleted by one on the battleground. The eraser triplets reduced to twins, their third dispatched by the great raven ways. Ain't have no chance. The brothers had been confined together in the womb, then the cell, and finally in the open world of the killing games. Now they're separate for the first time. The two that are left wet the swastikas on their necks with tears, and their third killed by a black man at that. On our side, we lost 80. A good man that done bad long time ago, big jovial man somehow, despite the blood on everything. Not a bad fight, but it wasn't a good one either. 80 hesitated for a moment and found himself punctured in a way that could never be patched. Out on circuit after the loss, Razor looks at me as we step through, crunching the evidence of spring's relent on our feet. He's asking for a song. I don't got many remembrances memorized, I say. What you mean, Razor says. All that shit you sing sound like memorial shit, so go ahead. I look to Bells, who walks, head up, crying and quiet. Man, I'll sing one if you ain't got one. All this goddamn singing the whole year, now singer ain't got a song in him. Imagine that. That's fucked, bro. Give me a tune at least. I'll freestyle one time for my bro, Razor says. A tune to hum comes to me immediately, and this is where we'll do the thing. Mm-hmm. 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 Keep it going. Mm-hmm. I see Razor taking it in, closing his eyes, gripping the hilt of his weapon. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When he was here in the living, 80 and Razor and Bells would rhyme the miles away, passing the bars back and forth. More than a few times, they formed rhymes around my songs. Today, Razor takes the sound in, breathes it through his whole body. We follow the anchor down a river I'll never know the name of. And Razor says, I love my boy, a fat man. I loved him when he got there. I know he done some wrong, but Lord, he gone. So please gon' let him in. And Bells takes it from him to the same tune. Reggie was a legend. Ride or die, sink or swim. He stood with me, and now he's free. So please, God, let him in. I feel passing through me, and I do not deny the spirit. His mom named him a king's name, 'cause she knew what he had within. His only sin was too human. So please, God, let him in. So please, Lord, let him in. So please, Lord, let him in. Good job, y'all. I love it. Wish I could just stop there. Perfect. Y'all did that.
That is beautiful, actually. Really beautiful.
Is it cool?
Yeah. You
I'm
just
working
did
on
that?
it.
You just came up with that? Well, I mean, you just came up with the collaboration?
I tried it once before. I tried it yesterday. It was okay.
Did
I like this one better.
Harrisburg won?
I mean, I'm gonna say that no matter what. Just to be honest with you, I'm like, no, New York was better. I don't know. This one, the acoustics felt good. There was just more.
Yeah.
Don't tell New York I said that.
Yeah.
That was great. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
So Chain Gang All-Stars, Is It Once? I'm just gonna start here because of our ability to congregate together and sing together. It's prose, it's nonfiction, it's poetry. Here I'm thinking about Staxx's poem. It's song. And so for you, well, your primary mode is working in prose, right? Would you say that that's true?
Yeah.
What happens for you in the liminal spaces between genre? How do you know this is where poetry comes in? This is where song comes in?
It's such a good question. And I think we were talking a little bit before, like, I feel most interested in a project that feels a little bit impossible at the inception, like, or towards the beginning. And once I realized what Chain Gang was gonna be, this like sort of polyvocal, multi-angle thing, pardon me, I had a sense that it was gonna take a lot of different type of modes and energies and even genres. And even though I think of myself as someone who primarily writes prose, I've always the thing I tell my students all the time, the thing that you feel like maybe is like a big weakness of yours, right on the other side of it, or maybe that actual thing might be your big strength. And so when I was in grad school and I did MFA at Syracuse, I was really I came in not having a lot of like hierarchical ideas about like realism or not or surrealism or whatever, and then I kind of learned them. I inherited it because that the academia will do that. You know, you kind of get the sense that the highest art is that which most closely mimics like lived life as some people know it. But even my idea about realism versus not is, I think it's way more fluid than people think. I think poets have a good sense about that, but I think on the fiction side, it's like there's like these like dichotomies. But anyways, I have these like kind of crazy way out there stories. I have stories that were one-to-one things that happened to me and my family in my first book. And I remember going to George, one of my mentors was George Saunders, and being basically like, without asking this, I was asking like, should I do this or that? And he was sort of just like, yes. And it was a really big blessing for me because now, though, I think the thing that I feel most comfortable about myself is that like it's very rare for anything of mine to be just the one thing. You know, if I'm interested in it as a writer, it's gonna have like this multiplicity. So. And that's also kind of growing just my person. Like I'm interested in like making my own music actually. Like, you know, like I make beats and I do like sort of rap stuff, and I'm interested in photography and directing. And so I think that through this book, I tried my best to just be as close to the character as possible. But I know Staxxx has a poem in her, and she kind of just like told me it. The section you're talking about, I wrote that in one like weird fugue state of 3 hours, walking around this like weird repetitive loop in my ex-girlfriend's house. It's like this like kind of thing that sometimes I get into. But I knew because that's who she was. Same thing with Hendrik Singer. He has a song, and some of that comes from his lineage and doing the research and understanding the chain gangs and the work songs, which come from the slave hollers. And so like I sort of just like fill myself with all the information I can, and then let the characters rock out how they want to rock out. But this book I sort of knew because of the diversity of characters was going to ask for just a ton of those different things. And so in those spaces, I think I'm just like trying my best to listen. I feel like I'm just trying my best to listen really closely to whoever and whatever's there, and try not to resist whatever seems like wants to come out.
Exactly. And it's interesting. So when you're working inside of genres, or not even inside, but between, you begin to realize the possibility in work.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, when you first came to sit down, I think I read somewhere that 7 to 8 years you've been working on this project. So when you first contrived it, did you see yourself merging the dystopian novel with satire, or the imagined future with caricature of the real? Did you know that was the vein that you were going to be working in?
I don't think I knew like all the way. I think there's certain things that I can sort of just intuit will probably come out. But even now, some of those things I'm almost wondering like if I rely on them too much. So a big one for me, maybe you've noticed, is like I feel like I have to say something funny. Or else I feel like nervous, I feel like stressed out. I think it comes from I don't know what, from like being the person who didn't have the whip, didn't have the car, and like you just sit in the back seat, just say funny things to kind of like earn your ride, kind of. I don't know, but like I feel like even without thinking about it, if I hear something really awful, like maybe it's a defense, it's probably a lot of a defense mechanism as well. Like I'll add some humor to it. But also sometimes by making something funny, I'm just like removing a veneer or something, or removing a euphemism. I find myself often doing that. Like the joke is just saying exactly what is, because euphemism has become so embedded into the culture. So sometimes there's that. So I guess I'm saying with the satirical elements, or like the humor that's kind of humor with a knife, I think that's a little bit embedded into my person. So even without thinking, knowing what's coming, I could maybe presume some of that would be there. I don't think I had a strong sense of how literally I would superimpose the past, present, and future against each other. Because I didn't know I was going to do anything like footnotes. So, like, that's an example of something that I would think I would never do because I kind of hate footnotes. But I could talk about, I mean, that's a whole other thing, but like they offered me something that I ended up feeling, oh, I could really use this. And it's like a fun challenge to make this mechanism feel really useful and enjoyable to me, someone who does not like them usually. And so I'm always, I guess I know very little about what's gonna come, but the humor piece I could probably guess just knowing myself. And even as I say that now though, like I'm thinking about what I'm working on now, and I wonder how much, who am I, would I try to pull that part out a little bit? Because sometimes you can, I don't know, sometimes I wonder where I'm hiding or not. In this book, I felt good about it. I felt it was very useful, but there's other times you could use it to hide. So I've been thinking about it in context of what I'm doing now, and like I wonder how I can like keep it honest. But there's a lot of, I really don't know much, but except the humor piece and maybe like, I know that there'll be I'll try my best not to be like, this is the answer, you know? I think there's a sense of like sort of exploring and asking a question that I aim for, but that isn't always the case. But I think I usually hope for that at least. That's a really good question.
Well, keep your humor, please. I mean, as one
Yeah.
of your devoted readers, I have to say that
Thank you.
it's something as poets that we often deal with. I talked to Philip Levine one time, and I asked him, when did you give yourself permission to be humorous in your poems? And he said it wasn't until he was middle-aged, and he had written half of his oeuvre at that
Wow.
point. And so there's something beautiful about letting yourself, your full self, come through in your text.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's true. I appreciate that. I think like it's funny. It's like almost like the circular thing because I was very comfortable when I went to MFA. Then I'm like, maybe it's like too haha, and then luckily again, I think having George there helped, and I was like, well, that's actually who I am. But then there's some times where I'm just like, am I like, you know,
Yeah.
like I don't. For the example I would say is like I talk to like people like they may be doing something like this, right? I have no idea how people do readings and don't say anything funny ever. The idea of it feels terrifying to me.
It's awful.
But some she said it's awful.
As a poet, I can tell you it's awful.
No, a lot of readings are super boring for sure.
You know what I'm saying?
No, a lot of readings suck. But I'm just saying like, but have you ever been to a reading where it's not funny and good? Because sometimes it happens and that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I can't do it, but a part of me is like, I wish I could.
Yeah.
I guess, you know, I don't know. But you're right. It would be like a really big slicing off of myself, I think. But
Yeah.
I'm interested in like what would happen even if I tried, you know?
Yeah, and I think in your work you give us your full self, right? And there's a sense of that. So with Friday Black, we had the opportunity to interact with your short stories, and now with Chain Gang All Stars, we begin to see how the creative mind works in a longer form. And so I'm wondering how much the short story informed the longer form.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say like extremely. I thought Chain Gang was going to be a short story for Friday Black. So then I started doing the research. I kind of realized Thurwar had all this stuff around her, and it got like way, way, way too big. I used to say that in my heart, I think I'm a short story writer, like in my soul. But I think what I meant by that is, and the same thing, reason why I love poets so much and poetry is that I like the feeling that I like the biggest level of intentionality. So I like how poets, like as a rule, pretty much think on the syllable level, where some people who are writing novels are thinking on like the sentence level,
Right.
and that is not bad, but like it's so much less intentional in my opinion. And so the short story is a nice place where you could really be narrative focused, but to me it's like I just don't have the space to let like even a syllable slide, you know. And so it requires a certain vigilance that I feel is like matches with my, I don't know, anxiety level and like vigilance in life.
Right.
So that's what I think I mean when I say that I in my like heart, like my soul is tuned to short fiction. But when I think when writing the novel, my like secret goal, actually, like my secret like, if there was like a objective, like a video game, a series of objectives, was like have the immediacy and intentionality of a short story for the entire novel. Like that's what I tried to keep in my mind. So that's like the truest way it informs it, with this feeling that like hopefully nothing feels extra, which I'm sure is not going to be true for everyone, but for me it was like it felt like this matters, and also, I think the short story and working on several short stories at once just created like a kind of attention issue with me that like I just get bored, and so I still have like other theories about this too. So I've talked about George a lot, not just because I'm trying to name drop and let people know I know him, but like, because he's a big influence to me. And if some people know his work, some of his short stories is a very, very, very inflected like voice. It's very, very, very voicey. I think that's kind of hard to sustain over a novel, or I know it is, right? And I think that's why George had such a hard time going to the novel, in terms of like finally doing, because he likes to have this like really, really close third person. By that, I'm like, it's like a third person, but it almost operates like a first person if you look at his stuff, which to me is like his signature move, which I am really into, like that really, really close third person. That's not even a regular third person. It's also like a person who's like has a very particular job that really influences their thinking, and so there's like a kind of a barrier into understanding their internal monologue. That and then there's a kind of a cool reward of understanding it, because in the George story, 3 pages in, it's almost like you learned a new language. I feel, to me, it's like example of like, imagine there's like a alien spaceship and you don't know anything about it, but you press a couple buttons, it kind of like jerks forward, and eventually, without knowing, you kind of like mind meld with it. Now you can fly it. It's a very like rewarding reading experience that some people will be turned off immediately, but for someone like me who was turned off immediately, I remember when that first story I got from him from a woman named Lynn Tillman, I was like, this sucks. Like, what is this? But then like in trying to get it, you realize, oh wait, like this is like respecting me enough to be a little bit a little bit sort of opaque, or like it's doing itself. He threw you right into the situation. You had to figure it out, kind of.
Yeah.
And in that figuring it out, you attain a certain type of mastery and a really particular closeness to the character that has a half-life though. So this is like a long answer to the question, but like to me, being able to have that really intense, close, specific, hyper-specific voice can only be sustained so long. And again, the specificity is always, to me, like determined by the distance from your own actual natural speaking voice. Right. So all that to say, in a novel like this, I could have both Thurwar, who's like my middle C, closer to me, and a third person that is like very like has its inflections, but is like very like anyone can understand it, versus someone like Hendrik Singer Young, who has a pretty inflected voice, versus Simon Kraft, who's extremely inflected. Like it'd be so hard to write a whole book of Simon Kraft,
right?
Or exactly. I don't think I could.
I get it. Yeah.
So the short story, all that to say, short story taught me about like sort of like intense voices, that how long I can sustain them, and then I could kind of play with that idea in like a bigger playground in Chain Gang. Sorry, that's a really long answer, but
no, it's perfect, because it actually moves into the next question, because I was thinking structurally how you've mapped it out. So as I was reading, I was just kind of seeing mastery and craftsmanship in this way. And so you've got these rotating narrations, and when you enter in, you do feel as if you have to piece it together. But what the rotating narrations allow you to do is it allows you to hit on the different perspectives, or the rotating perspectives around a central a piece, whether it's like the penal system or whether it's capitalism.
Yeah.
All of these different people are kind of tying all of these disparate threads together.
Yes.
And I don't want the question to be as simple as, how do you do that, right? But like, how do you do that?
No, even the way you're talking about it is like very close to how I am conceiving of it. I like talking about this kind of stuff too.
I nerd out on this,
yeah,
man.
this is like,
this is it.
This is like, I like talking about this. So I hope you do too. From like, because I'm going to do it anyways. um, so for me, in this book, I said Thurwar is my middle C, but she's also like the central beam. She's like the central beam, and like I like what you said about rotating, and I have like these like pieces that are almost like if you imagine like a stairs around her or something, and maybe Staxxx is like the biggest one.
Interesting.
And almost to the point where it also makes like its own beam itself, and maybe even like inside that beam there's like a little like iron bar that is like the penal system, but around that thickly is like Thurwar. Anyway, so structurally what I'm saying is that Thurwar is like the thing from which I'm like growing all the stuff. So even if someone never meets Thurwar, I'm interested in how they have to something that affects her. Everyone has something. That's how, like, when I got later down the line, I was like, I can't really justify this being in the book because it doesn't follow that thing. It became like a mode for me. So I have Thurwar, the protagonist, and I have this system that's moved that is like situating her life. And there's many different actors in that system. I want to like turn more so I connect to you guys. I'm not trying to ignore you, just the way the chair is. And so. When I think about the structure, I was always like, okay, I have Thurwar, but maybe I have to go as far as initially someone like Dr. Patricia feels very far away, but then she's actually not that far away. It's really close. She ends up being really close. And I didn't have to do it, but I felt, for me, it just felt like a nice little, maybe too neat of a bow, but I wanted it. Yeah, so I have this person who's like going through this thing, and I just think about all the different ways that people or situations can influence her experience as sort of the pinnacle of like a certain type of fame, a certain type of power, a certain type of oppression. And so in that way, she embodies a lot of it. As opposed to being like the system, because she contains so many things to just her person, it can be a person that is like that which is sort of the sun in that solar system. But basically I view her as like the center, and I have these like different bodies circling her, and that's how I actually thought of the structure.
So when you come to your writing table, is that iron bar always a character, or is it sometimes a theme, or is it sometimes a system?
The iron bar inside the column.
Inside the column.
Good question. It's like a metaphor and a metaphor. I think it's hard to say, like, in Chain Gang, on some level, it was like the carceral state in prison. So like, but at some point, like, Thurwar became such a person that I almost forgot about that. Yeah. If that makes sense?
Yeah.
Other stories, I usually try to forget about that, because then I feel like if I'm thinking about that iron bar or whatever too much, because sometimes it's just a string. Sometimes it's not that thick. Like, I feel like you can get really didactic, you know. So I try to, like, there is something, like, I know that the book deals like with the penal system, but eventually I almost like to forget about that and be like, here are these humans in a context. And so for most of the time I try to get there. That said, I usually can remember, like the title story in my first book was called Friday Black, and it's about like a world where, like, on Black Friday everyone's like sort of killing each other. There's a section in the store designated for bodies. I worked many Black Fridays. You kind of get what it's about. I'm not saying capitalism is great, you know, but I try to not really even. It's like once I set up that, it's almost like that iron bar is a little bit of a scaffold, I guess. Maybe a scaffold is a better idea, and then I kind of eventually I pull it out and throw it away a little bit. It still ends up being about those things, but I usually let go of it. I just need it enough to understand the voice and, like, energy of that central person.
Yeah, and I'm talking about the central person again right now. So Thurwar, and I thought it was so interesting to have the main character, the protagonist, be a Black woman, because there's some commentary inside of the text itself about the disposability of souls, the disposability of humans. And so to have the central character be a Black woman, what went into thinking about identities as a part of character formation?
Yeah, it's another really important question, I think, for this book. So initially, like in the very, very, very beginning, I just saw Thurwar and it was sort of like, well, let's just see what happens. But the reason I think part of why the book became a novel was thinking closely about all that implications of her identity and all the ways like the system might try to like pull and push on that. And so I think, and just by appreciating that personally on my own, but then also by doing the research in the carceral state, but also just observing the world, you can kind of start thinking about what the ways in which like there's a way that a Black woman in particular might be like adored, but also like it's like the edge to it, like a little bit of hate, a little bit of
like reviled and adored at the same
the
time.
same time.
Yeah.
And like the bigger you get, like the more that happens. And like this sort of like, but also this hypersexualization, this like desire to consume or something that's particular, I think, especially with a Black woman. That's also like the other side of that thing where it's like we love you, but we kind of want to like eat you a little bit, you know? And also we want you to like we feel like we're supposed to want you to do well, but like we won't like create that space. So anyways, all those things, there just became more and more like sort of by understanding the ways that which like the system was like echoing off her person, like the world got more like rich. And then that becomes true for like a lot of people too, that in the book. It's sort of why Staxxx ended up becoming Staxxx, because I wasn't really sure her partner would be a woman, to be honest, in the beginning. I think maybe early on I even tried to not, but I knew that the partner was gonna have to understand like what I just described, like in their body,
Right.
as well.
Right.
And moreover, they were gonna have to like kind of upset a system where they were sort of like in a power position, which is just something that like men are less likely to do. And like the example I give when I talk about that is like the NBA and WNBA, everyone sort of knows it's a huge, insane like pay disparity. But if there's like a social issue that needs like athletes to speak up, the WNBA will speak up way before the NBA does. Because I think by proximity to privilege and power, like men are much more enticed toward just like, let's just leave it alone, for a lot of reasons. And so knowing what I kind of started figuring out was going to happen in the book, and Staxxx also had to be who she was.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I want to go back to this idea that you talked about the footnotes, because you said you didn't like footnotes, right? But then you use footnotes as sort of a postmodern metafiction, and in some cases meta nonfiction, in order to contextualize and concretize kind of the brutality of the system.
Yeah.
And so what happened for you where you were thinking, this is the right conveyor for that?
Yeah, so this is another one where like I'm trying to make it concise in my mind really quick, but because there's a lot that went into it. But my resistance initially to traditional footnotes is, if you ever look at footnotes, they exist one-dimensionally. That is to say, they're encyclopedic. You look at one and you see it's more information about the thing you just saw, which makes it so that the journey from seeing it to moving your eyes is a little bit mundane or predictable or boring. Even if the context is a little interesting, you know it's going to be that type of thing. When I was younger, like 15, I had gotten like the John Gardner Art of Fiction, and that was like my first like fiction book, and I was like, I'm a real writer, and his whole thing was you never break the fictive dream. And so inherently, footnotes really announce a book as a text, as a book, and so to me, it like really breaks the fictive dream. So it's another
interesting.
But Alexander Chi told me something cool. He's like, well, dreams are nonlinear, and so I revised that a little, but was my feeling about them.
Yeah.
But when I think, like I said, I just, for me to be really, really interested in a project, even though the book was already like kicking my ass, I was like, I need another thing, you know? Because like, there's like some weird part of me, and it's not, because I don't know how to articulate it, because there's a version of it which sucks, which is like, I don't like when writers are like trying to be impressive to try to be impressive, but I do like personally to challenge myself, like to challenge myself.
Right.
Because I always know that something cool will come out of it. And so with the footnotes, I was like, okay, I don't really like this thing, like because of it, I think it breaks a piece of what I think is important. And so I sort of like had to like almost, I had to reverse engineer and think about what don't I like about it, which I arrived at the thing I just described, that eye-moving moment. And I was like, what if I can make that journey like exciting?
Right.
And to do that, how can you do that? For me, it was by introducing variety to the end place. So they're not just encyclopedic or a certain type of encyclopedic. Sometimes they're elegiac about a person.
Right.
Sometimes they're real facts about our lived physical reality. Sometimes it's facts about the fictional reality. Sometimes it's just another thing that I don't want to spoil. So I play video games and stuff. So like to me, it became like a mechanic that like how much can I get out of this one mechanic?
Right.
And like in games, like that's like good design if you can get like one mechanic that works a lot of different ways. So I'm blanking on a good example of it, but like in God of War, like if he has his weapon, he can attack with it, but also it's a ranged weapon. Also, like maybe it glows when like enemies are near or what, something like that. Like it's one thing that has a lot of potentialities. And so now by doing that with the footnotes, when I see a footnote, there's like potential for delight or wonder or surprise or all those things because you don't know what's going to happen. Another like video game based examples like if you play like a lot of, let's say Zelda or something, or I'm thinking about this game Hollow Knight where like there's like chests, right? You can find a chest. You expect to find money or like something good in the chest usually. So you go up to the chest, fine. But I remember I was playing this one game and one time ever, the chest, I went into it, it became a monster and like attacked me and I was shook the rest of the game. The rest of the game I was going up to every chest because it was like a shocking thing and it was like not necessarily pleasurable, but it created this like really big spiking feeling. So it taught me though that like if I can like sort of like for lack of a better term like fuck up the like formula like even like once or twice or a couple of times, now when you get to the thing, you won't be like, okay, let me go learn some more. Like, you know, most of the time you see your footnotes like, okay, I'm about to go to school. Which also can be, and the fact is, probably most of them are that. But by like creating the diversity of what they could be, I sort of was able to like attach towards like the resistance I personally had. Yeah. So that's how I think about it.
And as a reader, it was super interesting because you didn't know when you encountered a footnote, you weren't sure what you're going to find, so you wanted to read into them,
exactly.
Right? You didn't know if it was going to be an explanation of a trademark or if it's going to be an actual witness for what's happening in the penal system.
Yeah.
And so it was fascinating because you're breaking the fourth wall and not knowing what's beyond the wall.
Literally.
But every time you go to the footnote, you're like, I gotta see what's going on here.
Yeah. I also don't want people to skip them, which matters a lot to me, similar to the prologue. So like, I feel like that was a way to to do that. And it was way more before, but my editor was like, slow down, buddy. Because I was just like, oh, wow, what's that brand of water bottle?
Right on, right on.
Because that's the kind of thing where you could go like way, way, way overboard if you don't, if you aren't careful.
Yeah.
But I ended up, and it's in some ways, it's some people's, it's one of the signatures of the book now.
Yeah.
And to me that feels like cool because it's genuinely a thing like I usually feel like some resistance towards. So
yeah.
something like kind of cool came out of it.
That's so awesome. I have this question I'm burning to ask, but Alex gave me the 5-minute mark, so I have to open it up, and I want to give you guys the opportunity to ask some questions. But I'm still going to hold on to this question just in case.
Let's make it our last question. If you have a question, feel free to raise your hand, and I'll come around with the mic. Over here.
I've tried to tell a lot of people about reading this book, and I start to explain it, and they say, oh, like Hunger Games. What should be my response to that?
You and me both. If someone, you and me both, let me not get in trouble. Are we filming this?
Yeah.
We are?
Yeah.
Then I just keep it cute. You could be like, kind of, but not really. No disrespect to that book, but yeah, you and me both. But I actually put it. No, let me not get.
So this is a Read with Jenna pick. Jenna Bush Hager. We know who her dad is.
Yes.
You have a footnote about her dad.
Yeah.
Were you surprised that she picked this book? What were your thoughts on that, knowing her background? She has some progressive picks, but...
You said you're filming this, right? No. The question was I surprised? I was not surprised because not a thing I think about, to be honest. Like, I think that, first off, Jen has been actually great, to her credit. I'll say that, like, without any doubt in my heart, in my personal experience. I think that I like that she's using a platform to grow readership. I think that probably on the side of the publishers, they've attached too much to, like, whoever gets to create this thing that gets to pretend it's a badge of honor or a merit-based thing, and it's not. And so I think in the beginning, I was a little bit, like, there's a very specific set of things that go in that corner, you know, of the book. And a person liking it, an individual liking it, and let alone the history, is not something I ever really thought about ever once, to be honest with you. And it's kind of it's interesting because when you get it, everyone's like, "Oh my God!" and you're like, you know. So it was an interesting thing, but I feel that, like you said, that's true. And so I don't know if there was like a weird Thanksgiving and she was like, "Fuck you, Grandpa," or what. But I respect it a lot.
First, I just want to say thank you so much for just creating such a beautiful piece of work. It really was wonderful to read. And thank you to you for the questions. It's been
Amazing
a fabulous
questions.
conversation. I wanted to ask, so with Thurwar, did any part in just choosing her or woman as the protagonist go into sort of softening or humanizing the aspect of the incarceration system? Did it allow for more room for maybe people who aren't familiar with it, and so to have this sort of softness because it was sort of anchored with a woman?
I think without even noting or realizing it did. I think in the same way that, like, we have tons of people being obliterated in a genocide that's being facilitated by this government right now, but like a tagline to make you care about it would be like women and children. You know, I think so, like, in some senses, like, there's something like that. I can't say it was super, I wasn't thinking about that way to say like they'll care more because she's a woman, but I think the fact of her being a woman and several characters that are important to the book being women sort of created that just inherently, and also gave an avenue to think about the particular violences that the system has that are like explicitly targeting women, actually. You know, so kind of did do that, but it almost like I found that through the research and just writing, as opposed to like knowing that was a thing. So I didn't have like a preconceived idea about sort of trying to create that. I wasn't writing like women are being blown up, so to speak. You know what I mean? I wasn't trying to say that, but it ended up having that effect. Smart question.
I love this book.
Thank you so
Honestly,
much.
it's like one of my favorite books. It's also devastating, completely crushed me. So I was curious, like, how did you come to that without giving like any spoilers or any, like, what made you choose that?
I can't say too much, and I guess you're talking about the end. I tried everything else, you know. Like, to be honest, I was making myself sad too. Seriously, like for me, like to write a book. Like I see one here maybe after that one. I feel very I kind of like fall in love with the characters. So, and like, not to be like too sentimental about it. Like, it took me 7-ish years, 8-ish years, and again, sometimes I feel like writers kind of like to cap about that. Like, I wasn't working every day for 7 years. I had a whole other book come out. Like, things were changing, but it was my most like consistent like part of my life for a very volatile part of my life. I was in grad school. I got out of grad school. I did a fellowship, got out of fellowship. My dad was alive. My dad died. I became a caretaker for a bunch of people. Like, a lot of stuff changed. and the book was like kind of like the one thing that was consistent. And so you kind of grow like a really, to me, like a really serious connection to it. And so to do some of those things, it was actually like genuinely, like I tried to like wiggle my way out of it, but by then the story kind of knows what it wants to do, and you kind of, it feels like a bigger disservice to like not obey it than to like do the hard thing at the end. It's a great question.
Hi.
Hey,
Thank you so much for
of course.
everything.
Of course.
So I was recently a student at Emerson College, and we have this program called Emerson Prison Initiative. That's a college and prison program. So we have professors that teach on the main campus and also on the prison campus.
Yeah.
And I had this one professor who teaches at both campuses, and she asked the question that we hear in class a lot, can art make change, like in the world? Can it really make change? Can writing make change? It was a writing class. And of course, all the students answered, yes, of course, yes, art can make change. My writing can make change, my art can make change. She asked this question to her incarcerated students, and unanimously they answered no.
Yeah.
So I wonder, this book I see as a book that really is there to make change, to speak on a political issue, and I believe that it can make change. And I wonder, what's your take on that question?
It's a super important question, and like, I mean, I'm pretty all in at this point. Like I do. I mean, there's so many types of change, right? I know it can make change because in writing the book, I discovered myself as abolitionist fully. So it changes how I move through the world. So already I know for sure. I've been lucky enough to like be in a certain type of platform where I get a lot of feedback and a lot of people tell me that they've thought about these ideas for the first real time in their life. So I also have some sense of that either. But even outside of that, like, it's gave me a channel to engage with a certain type of idea, which is like rooted in love in a really serious way. So I got changed by it. In terms of like the sort of larger structural, like sort of institutional things, I know it also does too. A big part of doing anything that hasn't been done is imagining, right? Having an imagination about it and being able to like see it before it exists. And I think to even just understand the fact of the book, it trains that same muscle. Just to literally comprehend it, you have to stretch your sort of the part of your mind that generates things and imagine it and feel something from it. And so it's kind of like a practice to me. And there's a million other ways in terms of like being empathetic, in terms of just getting informed. I really, really do truly believe it can do something. And I kind of know it can, but it's to me, later on in the book, there's like this idea where it's like, can people, to me, it's sort of like the idea of like, can people change the world? I'm like, we are the world, like we are it. And to not think so is like just consigns ourselves to obliteration, in my opinion. And so I don't think, but I also understand people who are right under the thumb of it right now, not feeling that same space. And so because of the privilege I'm allowed, I can hope the way I am, and I should, So I'm not like sort of trying to like be condescending to anyone who doesn't have that same belief, because as a lot of things can be hard, but I'm more or less chilling. Like, there's people who are right under the thumb. Like if I go to, like I said, there's people getting bombs dropped in their head right now, and I'm like, don't worry. Like if you make good art, you could change it all. It's like you could see how they would be like, go fuck yourself. Sorry, but I have to believe in it, and I do, like in 100% earnest. And like it's almost corny how much I completely believe in it. Like I 100% totally believe that art and its ripples can like change the world. Like I believe in so much it's embarrassing. For real. It's a great question. It's an important question.
Hi, thanks
Hey.
so much for sharing your thoughts tonight.
Thank
You
you.
said something earlier in the evening that really struck me. It was a phrase something to the effect of, when I was writing this, like Staxxx told me that she would do this, something like that.
Yeah.
It really reminded me of how I've heard George talk about like the way that he writes in his process, sort of talking about the story or the characters as if they're this own living thing, which I admire and also fascinates me. Is there a kind of like ritual or practice that you do when you're sitting down to write that allows you to get into that headspace of like, it's not me thinking about what the character should do, but like now here's the character or the story telling me what's about to happen?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I did, especially for this book, like, so like my therapist is kind of like a woo-woo magic kind of lady, kind of therapist, and she had me do this whole like specific meditation, because this book has like very disparate voices, and like I actually couldn't write like Hendrix Singer and Staxxx the same day. I had to like go to sleep and like kind of get into it. Especially with Hendrix, I would like listen to a certain type of thing and like go into it. Like I do. Sometimes it's just like mindful. Like, I do a lot of like meditation stuff anyways, but like for the writing of this book, and especially people like Staxxx and I don't know, Singer, who are so like heart forward, I guess, I had to like kind of like put myself in this kind of place, and I had different things for each of them, but to even get to the place where I could do the specific thing, sometimes I would just like make my world really small, and it could be just as much as like this is a pen, I have a pen in my, like this is a pen, like this is a pen, and I just like be like just in that thing, and then try to like I'll usually read, it depends on where I'm at, but like if I'm in the middle of a Hendrix chapter, I'll read like the beginning of it and try to like rev myself into it, and then see if I can like catch it again. Towards the later, a lot of this book I did in pandemic, and that's when I was really like every day with it, like 2 hours a day, 1,000 words, or 2 hours every single day. It was to the point where, and then like my schedule was around it. I would wake up, meditate, go to the gym, come back, go to the computer, start writing. I got to eat after writing, and it was so like regimented. I would get to like 950 words, and my mouth would start watering. It was like such a crazy state to be in, and like, I've never done that. I'm very much like a binge writer. This is my first time ever doing it, because it was like we can't go anywhere, and so yeah, I have to do something, especially if like it's people who have a specific voice in the same book. I had to. Yeah, and I can't even tell you exactly, because I can't remember all of it or what it was, but I did have to do like a very specific thing to get into like their, like, to put it in their like skin. It was kind of, I don't know, like kind of weird even for me, but I did have to do something. It's a great question.
We have time for just one more question. We'll go over there.
These have been great questions.
Sorry, just a follow-up question to
Yeah.
that. How did you come out of that state? So I've been wondering, because this is such an intense book with really strong voices. So how do you like live as you while still trying to produce something so intense?
Usually I would like go get a sandwich, like I said, like, but it was seriously like, for that part of it, it was like, well, the real thing, I would usually I would get to 1,000 words before the 2 hours when I was like really locked in. And I would like kind of, and that was good for me because it left like stuff in the tank. That also made my writing a lot better. Like I didn't write till like I'm like done, you know? And so I would like think about what I was gonna write tomorrow, and kind of also just like sit there for a little bit, you know? Like thinking about tomorrow, like what I would like try to like start with, and then kind of like be calm, and then go find food after that. It's a great question.
Airea, back to you for your last question.
Last question, I have to ask you this.
Perfect.
So we were talking about how good fiction, good writing just changes you. And it holds up a mirror so that when you look at yourself when you first write it, you look at yourself when you finish. And they're two different people, you know? And I'm wondering, in your head, when you first started this, did you think that entertainment and celebrity culture were carceral? And when you came out of it, did you think that entertainment culture and celebrity culture are carceral? Because that's what, when I came out of it, I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's a great, absolute, I think like by finishing the book and thinking about the book and like revising it, because some of those things, like those threads, you pull up even more.
Yeah.
I started to feel like everything is carceral. Like I started to feel like I started to feel like all of our responses, so much of our responses to each other are this like very ungenerous completely without compassion, kind of harshness. You know, I started seeing it like in everything. I could see it. There's a carceral element to like celebrity culture, celebrity worship, celebrity obliteration. I can see it in just our consumption of people generally as celebrities that are otherwise. It made me see like it made me see so much of our experience of living and holding each other as like carceral. But it also made me feel like doubling down insanely on like the compassion thing. It made me feel like what I was talking about when I say, do I believe art can like change things? For me, like what's at the centerpiece of this one is that kind of, yes, it can. Explicitly, that's like something like they kind of talk about, but also like compassion is like really, really important. If we can like infuse more compassion to every single one of our cultural institutions, every single one of our structures, every single one of our daily like moments, so much can be changed.
Love and transformation. Right on.
Facts.
Thank you so much, Nana. Thank you so much.
This was great.
Thank you.
Y'all did
It was
amazing.
awesome. Thank you all. Nana's going to be signing books over here to my left, your right. So please join us over there after.
One more thank you to Nana and Airea. Thanks for
Thank you,
coming
guys.
out. We have books available for purchase up at the cafe. Nana's sticking around to have a book signing over at this table. Thanks for coming out, everyone. Have a good night.